What is up, everybody? It is June 23rd, 2026, and today we're going to be talking about the Iran deal and the 19 million barrels of oil, of which Donald Trump said has flowed through the Strait of Hormuz. On top of that, we're also going to cover the entire Israeli takeover of southern Lebanon, which continues on, and we're going to be discussing, again, the Iranian negotiators said, no, we did not agree to any kind of deal pertaining to ballistic missiles being off limits. And on top of that, we also have the Montreal shooting, which was pretty crazy. We're going to be looking at that. And on top of that, we also have a lot of other breaking news. Again, we're going to be looking at the markets, as we always do. So be sure to like, share, comment, subscribe. Not really a huge news day today. And ultimately, we're going to be looking at everything that's in the algorithm. Again, a lot of new things coming out on the COVID investigation that is happening on X. So we're going to be looking into that. Elon Musk has retweeted some things. We're going to be looking at the SpaceX stock that went down and it's going back up. And again, a lot of people lost money on SpaceX because they invested way too early. And again, they basically bought into the narrative that they thought SpaceX was going to be huge. But again, at the end of the day, this is by the time you hear about it, it's too late. So ultimately, be sure to like, share, comment, subscribe if you support the information, if you support the news. Again, we're going to be covering everything you need to know, and that's the idea. Leave a super chat. Leave your thoughts. What do you think about what we're talking about here? What do you think about what's going on in the Iran war? What do you think is going to happen next? I'm going to be talking about that. I think the Iran war is going to continue most likely. I don't really see this Iran war ending anytime soon personally. And honestly, I think that there's really going to be no real end in sight as long as Israel continues to lead the narrative and they lead the way on basically everything that's going to happen with this entire war. Again, when they say they're not going to end the war and we're going to continue taking Lebanon, we're going to take what we want. Netanyahu has said that. 70 to 80% of the Israelis are in on that. And overall, this is pretty much where we're at. So I think we're going to be continuing the war. Again, like, share, comment, subscribe, support the info. Work with me if you want to work with me in any kind of business ventures. And nothing else. Let's get right into it. So again, let's just see what's new in the algorithm. Because ultimately, there's a lot. And when we see everything that's really going on, it would make your head spin. It can. So honestly, it's crazy. Oil prices edge lower as market monitors tanker traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. Ultimately, this stems from this Tuesday as investors monitored tanker traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. Brent Crude futures, the international benchmark, fell 82 cents at the close of $77.08 a barrel. West Texas intermediate futures declined 65 cents to settle at $73.21. And then President Donald Trump said 19 million barrels of oil have flowed through the Strait of Hormuz on Monday, describing the volume as a record. CNBC could not immediately verify that figure. And again, because I don't know if that really happened, right? Ultimately, I think this is a lot of smoke and mirrors. This is to pretty much control what's going on with this entire war and really to control that algorithm, right? To control what is going to happen next in the Iran war. And that's ultimately the objective here. So when we look at all of this, that's kind of the most important thing to pay attention to. So ultimately, again, if you're just now tuning in, this is where we are at when it comes to this Iran war. Again, lots of big news. Again, 19 million barrels of oil flowed into the Strait of Hormuz. And again, when we look at all of it, pretty crazy. Lots and lots to pay attention to today. So who knows what's going to happen next, but this is what the big news of the day is. This is really where we're at. This is the narrative that they want you to pretty much not pay attention to, because what this tells us is that the Iran war is likely going to continue. They haven't been able to verify this 19 million barrels of oil, right? And so that's kind of why a lot of people are pretty much concerned right now. And so very interesting when we see all of these things happening. CNBC could not immediately verify that figure. Iran had declared the Hormuz closed over the weekend while the U.S. Central Command said the strait remained open to ships, sowing confusion about the status of the sea lane. So, again, this is the Brent Crude stocks right here, or not the stocks, the market right here. Whew. Meanwhile, U.S. Treasury issued a 60-day license that authorizes the production, delivery, and sale of oil from Iran. It allows the importation of Iranian crude to the U.S. and payment for the oil to be made in dollars. The license expires August 21st. So again, pretty wild. right? However, there are concerns that Iran may use the profits from oil sales to rebuild its military. Trump was asked on Monday if he could ensure that such a scenario would play out. And what he had to say was, well, they're not supposed to be doing that, so we'll see. Trump said at the White House during an executive order signing event. They're supposed to be using that money to buy food for their people, but because right now their people are very hungry and they're buying it exclusively from us, corn, soybeans, etc. Vice President J.D. Vance said there has been great progress made during the talks in Switzerland, even as Iran declared over the weekend that it had closed the Strait of Hormuz. U.S. Central Command said U.S. Central Command said that the Strait of Hormuz had not been closed. The recent developments appear to have boosted investor optimism that there may be a lasting resolution. If you follow the oil prices trading pattern here over the past couple of weeks, you're seeing that the markets are telling you it's increasingly confident that we're closer to the end of the conflict, said Managing Director of the U.S. Equity Strategy at Citi Research, Scott Chorner, on CNBC's Squawk Bots. So, lots of big news today. Again, that's just one of the headlines. We also had Marco Rubio in Abu Dhabi, and when we see all of this, we have to ask ourselves, what is all of this about? Why all the running around, right? And because there's basically Marco Rubio wants to persuade the Saudis to continue working with the United States and backing us in this war, right? And the Saudi Arabians, really, they just want more money. That's typically how it goes when it comes to these negotiations. And this is typically how it's always been with the Saudis. They're very transactional. U.S. President Donald Trump claims 19 million barrels of oil flowed out of the Strait of Hormuz on Monday, an all-time record. Oil prices are tumbling down, and the world is a much safer place, Trump writes on Truth Social as he celebrates the results of the deal he inked last week with Iran. Trump figures have not yet been independently verified. So again, all of these articles, whether it's from the Times of Israel or whether it's from CNBC, both are saying that these numbers are really not verified. So we don't know. We hope that's true. But according to the oil prices, again, actually seems to be a lot of positive development right now, right? So this is kind of where it's at. WTI crude at $73.10, Brent crude at $77.08, Murban crudes at $69.63, and natural gas is at $3.15. So prices are down for oil right now, and that's good for the consumer. Again, big energy companies, big oil, is really not liking this. They want that war with Iran overall, mainly because it's going to fill their coffers and it's going to fill their pockets, right? Meanwhile, again, we had this entire ordeal. Trump says Iran completely agreed to nuclear inspections, but Tehran denied any such plans. So why this is important is because, again, a lot of smoke and mirrors that have been thrown around when it comes to this entire Iran war and everything that's going on. Trump said Tuesday that Iran had fully and completely agreed to allow nuclear inspections, but Tehran said that there were no plans for the IAEA inspectors to return to its bombed enrichment sites. Vice President J.D. Vance said on Monday that the UN inspectors could return as soon as this week, though Mr. Trump said Tuesday there was no rush. Iran's chief negotiator told state media Tuesday that the Strait of Hormuz will never return to its pre-war conditions. And what is that? The pre-war conditions are that the United States controls the Strait of Hormuz, right? So now we don't control the Strait of Hormuz. It will be the Iranians, most likely, right? And ultimately, the Iranians are basically squeezing as much out of this entire deal as they can, right? They want to get as much money as they can. They want their sanctions dropped, which is happening. This was agreed to as well. So Monday was the busiest day for transits of the Strait of Hormuz since the war began. Again, marine traffic, and when we're looking at the actual, when we look at the actual maps here on marine traffic, that doesn't appear to be the case to me, in my opinion, because again, and you have to be, you have to kind of take it with a grain of salt when you look at marinetraffic.com or any of these, website, any of these map analyses when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz, right? You have these false vessels here, which they're like dead wallet, like, come on, pleasure crafts that have been, somehow magically appeared here. The Jersey Devil 404, these are not real. And basically these are fake AIS ships that have been placed in this area kind of to spoof and to throw off analysts like myself and you, anybody who actually wants to look at this. So putting these here strategically, who knows, maybe it was America, maybe it was our own Navy who put these little bleeps here. And again, these are not real vessels, and maybe they put them here strategically to make it appear as if there is actual movement going through the Strait of Hormuz. But if you ask me, not a lot of movement, and all of these other ships are pretty much Iranian ships, right? Or proxies of Iranian ships. So again, we have an Australian there, Australian fleet vessel there. So when we look at this entire Strait of Hormuz, to me, I just don't think this is exactly what they're saying. I don't really think that's true, 19 million barrels of oil. I think that's really just to keep the markets at bay, personally. Again, what I found interesting around Karg Island is we have so many ships here that I have not seen all of these ships clustered. All of these are like Iranian fishing vessels and whatnot, mostly, or unspecified vessels, according to AIS. And they're all placed strategically in this spot, almost like it's shaped as a blockade and positioned like a blockade. And it seems to me that they're protecting Karg Island, which is where, when you pay attention to what Trump has been saying, and the Lindsey Grahams and the all of these hawks that want to keep the war going on, they've been talking about Karg Island. And when we look at the Persian Gulf, same clusters that we've seen before. Near Fujairah, lots of crude oil tankers and LPG, LNG tankers here. We also have more clusters near Qatar. We have more clusters, very limited movement over here, right? So again, there's a lot of limited movement going through the Strait of Hormuz. Maybe there was a couple that went through, but ultimately we're not seeing that to be the case. And then when we look at the Red Sea or the Bab el-Mandeb Strait here, then we do see the same amount of traffic that we've seen for the past few months now, as we've been tracking this entire war. So nothing's really changed, if you ask me, when it comes to everything we've been looking at with all of this. So again, Pezeshkian says no negotiation on ballistic missiles. Iran's President Mossad Pezeshkian says no negotiations will take place on the country's ballistic missiles. President Donald Trump says there will be no further U.S. talks or U.S. naval blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. It insists Iran has agreed to allow nuclear inspections despite statements from the Iranian officials that it has not done so. Israeli troops opened fire today in the Lebanese town of Nabatea, Al-Fawqa, killing 2 people and wounding others. And what Hezbollah called a blatant truce violation against civilians. So again, this isn't really a truce that was ever settled. The Israelis have been saying that they're not going to stop. They're going to continue this entire siege on southern Lebanon for what they want to be a buffer zone. And really, that's what they're saying, a buffer zone, a military security zone. That's what they're saying it is. It is really a way to conquer more of that southern Lebanese territory, all the way up to Nabatea. And again, you have strikes already happening in Beirut, and they couldn't care less what Trump is really saying, right? So Netanyahu has said, they told me not to enter Rafah, I entered Rafah. They told me not to enter Gaza, I entered Gaza. They told me not to enter Lebanon, I entered Lebanon. This is a quote from Netanyahu, right? He said this. So ultimately, the Israelis and Netanyahu, especially, as we close in on the October elections for Israel, they want this done before October. Okay, so they want to secure this land before Netanyahu potentially faces international war crimes. Okay, so Iran's top negotiator, Mohammad Baghir Ghalibaf, says the agreement has been reached with the United States to release $12 billion in frozen Iranian funds. So it seems like the Iranians are winning a lot of this negotiation, if you ask me, when we really look at all of this. Oman announces temporary maritime corridor for Hormuz traffic. Oman said it had coordinated with the International Maritime Organization to provide a temporary maritime corridor for vessels seeking to transit the Strait of Hormuz, the country's state agency news reports. Vessels wanting to use temporary corridor would need to coordinate with the IMO based on the coordinates announced by the Organization of Omani Authorities, it added. The measure is aimed at ensuring freedom of navigation through the strategic waterway in the line of international law and the law of the sea, which uphold freedom of navigation without imposing transit fees. So again, Rubio was asked this today in an interview. He actually ended up speaking in Abu Dhabi. He ended up basically taking a flight there really to negotiate with the Saudis and everything that we've been seeing with a lot of this controversial war that pretty much, to me, is going to continue on. And so this is just a little summary here of what's really going on. But before we get into that, this is, again, Marco Rubio basically saying, UN says it will evacuate sailors stranded in the Strait of Hormuz as Rubio warns against tolls. So ultimately, this is an article from BBC when we look at this. UN's International Maritime Organization is set to evacuate more than 11,000 sailors who have been stranded in the Gulf because of the U.S.-Israel war against Iran. IMO Secretary General Arsenio Dominguez said that the large-scale operation would be carried out in cooperation with Iran, Oman, the U.S., and other coastal states in the region and the maritime industry. We have secured the necessary safety guarantees and have thoroughly verified the conditions for safe navigation to support these operations, he added. An interim deal was signed last week to end the conflict, but both the U.S. and Iran continue to clash on the details of the Memorandum of Understanding. The U.S. said that the MOU included guarantees that Iran's nuclear weapons program will come under inspections and by the International Atomic Energy Agency. U.S. President Donald Trump posted on social media on Tuesday, Iran has fully and completely agreed to the highest level of nuclear inspections long into the future. And again, here we just read an article just a few minutes ago where Iran said, no, we did not agree to any of this. So we have conflicting words here being said. Shortly before Trump's post, Iran said that the UN watchdog should not be able to inspect nuclear sites bombed by the U.S. and Israel last year. Interesting. In response, a U.S. official said the Iranians have agreed to a robust IAEA inspections of the remains of their nuclear program. The Iranian regime will say what they have to say for their domestic audience. So when we look at all of this, this war is not going to be ending anytime soon. It's very important to note that when we see all of this happening, you know, you got to pay attention to everything. Got to pay attention to all the different articles that are basically affecting the entire narrative of this war. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, this is a narrative war. So here's Marco Rubio in Abu Dhabi.
Let's go. Ready? You been waiting long? Hey, what's up?
On Iran, sir.
On?
On Iran, sir.
Okay.
Yesterday, the Iranians said that they had not agreed to inspections from IAEA, contradicting what Vice President Vance said. What is your understanding of what
Well, we know what they agreed to. I don't know why they have to say the things they say. Whatever their internal or domestic politics is, I guess they'll navigate it. But we know what they agreed to do, and now they'll either do it or they won't. And if they do, the process moves forward, and if they don't, the president will have some decisions to make.
What assurance are you offering the partners about regional security?
Well, we have long-standing relationships and partnerships with the three countries I'm visiting. And we're here in the United Arab Emirates. I don't know of anyone who's been stronger with the United States over the last 6 months. They've been phenomenal. I mean, for a long time, but certainly over the last 6 months. So we have an ongoing partnership that has been building for over a decade now and continues to grow. So my sense is that we're going to continue on that path, obviously taking into account the new regional dynamics that are at play. But we're really here to hear from them more than we are to talk. We want to hear their thoughts, especially in the aftermath of this weekend in Switzerland, and make sure that their views are taken into account in every decision that we make, because they're our partners.
Are the Gulf allies on board?
They're our partners, but it's like the Saudi Arabians are literally, considering basically working with the Iranians now. And basically, America is going to be left on their own, because the Saudi Arabians have already said that they're willing to work with Iran on certain elements of this entire deal in order to secure Lebanon and the sovereignty of the Palestinians, interestingly enough. So we'll see what happens going forth, but who really knows here?
Iran peace framework.
Well, I think all of our allies are on board with peace. Obviously, it all depends on the details of that peace as we work through, but it's a work in progress. This is an issue that's been going on for 47 years. So the idea that somehow it's going to get solved in a day and a half, I don't think anyone's been selling that. I think there's a framework and an outline upon which we can make real progress. I think good groundwork was laid over the last 72 hours, but a lot of work remains to be done, and we want to hear from our partners. We want to make sure that their views are taken into account, and we understand their security concerns, their regional economic concerns as well. So it's natural for us to be here and talk to them, because this is a very important issue for them. They're right next to it.
That's what he says.
On the issue of the reconstruction fund for Iran, the vice president and the president have both insisted the U.S. will not pay any money into that fund. Are you going to be asking Gulf allies here to consider helping with that?
No, that's far down the road. It's a part of what's discussed that could happen. If Iran makes a decision, if its leadership makes a decision that they want to be a country instead of a revolutionary movement that exports terror, they're going to have an opportunity to do incredible things in Iran.
It's that kind of rhetoric. This is why the Iranians are not really willing to work with the United States. This is why they keep walking away from the table. It is this rhetoric that is framing the Iranians as the terror threat here. When really it is the Israelis at this current time that are the terror threat. And we see this happening again in Gaza, in Lebanon. They are the real terror threat, and that's obvious. But again, we have to remember that Marco Rubio took how much money from Sheldon Adelson, and so these things matter. He is actually a very pro-Zionist politician working around Trump. He wants to be president, and he's just hanging behind J.D. Vance a little bit when it comes to the poly market predictions on who could end up being that 2028 GOP nominee. So ultimately, Marco Rubio, he's never going to say that Israel is the main terror threat here, which is causing this entire war to continue on. The Iranians have been responding to all of these actions of the Israelis, in my opinion. And again, what do you think? Why am I wrong?
I'm promising you that that's the choice they're going to make. I'm saying if that's the choice that they make, then there will be opportunities. And those opportunities could include investment, as you've seen other countries in this region benefit from investment, from foreign direct investment. It won't be our investment, it won't be our government money, but I think that is something that's going to have to depend on progress made on a host of other security issues that have to be confronted in the days to come.
Lebanese and Israeli officials are meeting in Washington as we speak.
Yeah.
Is it your position that that process should be separate from Iran peace deal?
Well, that process is separate. It's separate because Lebanon is a sovereign country. It has a government. And when it comes to Lebanon, what's happening inside of Lebanon, we're going to negotiate and deal directly with the Lebanese government. I spoke to President Ayoun along with the Vice President a few moments ago, spoke to him on Friday. Their people are there now on the ground directly. So the reason why that issue is always... Now, there's an Iranian issue with regards to Lebanon, and that is their support and sponsorship of Hezbollah.
Oh, and then there it is. There's the magic words. So he says nothing about Israel. Doesn't say anything about Israel. He says that it is Iran's sponsorship of Hezbollah and their promotion of Hezbollah when, again, the Iranians have been basically assisting Hezbollah to get rid of Israel because Israel has been the main driver, basically pushing forth this entire southern front, again, from Tyre, Lebanon, which is, again, is on the west coast of Lebanon, and then all the way to the east coast in Odessa, which is where, again, another Israeli-occupied territory, all the way up to Nabatea, which is just a little bit north in mid-southern Lebanon. And now, again, we also have strikes being done in Beirut by the Israelis. Today, again, 2 people were killed just in Lebanon today. And we're going to be getting to that article right after this. So when Rubio is saying how, oh, yeah, it's the Iranians are doing this, and the Iranians are the problem, that is why the Iranians keep walking away from the negotiation table.
And so that factor will be discussed as part of our conversations with the Iranians. But as far as the future of Lebanon belongs to the Lebanese people through their sovereign elected government. And that's who we're going to be working with.
Since the proxies aren't being addressed in the MOU, how are you trying to ease concerns to allies here in the region?
Well, that most certainly will come up in these conversations. And there are items outside the MOU that are certainly going to be covered, but that's one that will have to be covered. It'll be discussed. I think a careful reading of the MOU will see that when you talk about, for example, a complete and end of hostilities in the entire region, well, that's not possible. You can't have the end of hostilities and conflicts in the region as long as Iranian proxies are launching missiles and drones from Iraq and are participating in terrorism like Hamas did and like Hezbollah.
And again, there he is. Again, not even mentioning Israel. So what does this tell you? If we have all of the politicians around Trump who are not willing to say that Israel is the real problem here when it comes to this entire continued war, and the reason that these deals really can't go forward, because, again, the Israelis are the ones doing this. And what does Rubio say? He says, oh, it's the Iranians who are funding Hamas and funding Hezbollah. And listen, I'm not a fan of Hezbollah or Hamas at all by any means, because at the end of the day, yeah, they still have their own problems. You know, they're taking a lot of power away from the native people of Lebanon and their military, and they're superseding their military and, you know, overpowering that. Then we also have Syria, which is what Trump said. He wants to place Syria, the Syrian president or whatever, in control of that entire region, which, again, where is Lebanon's sovereignty? The Americans aren't really giving it to them. We're not giving it to the Lebanese people. And we're not fighting for Lebanon. We're fighting for Israel, because here you have Rubio and these politicians who are unwilling to say anything about Israel and how they are the ones who are pushing this entire war and driving this forward, continuing on, breaking ceasefires and violating ceasefires again and again and again. And then we end up blaming the Iranians. Totally wrong, and it's not going to end this war anytime soon.
So I do think it's covered by the MOU, and it is an issue that will be gotten to at the appropriate time in these negotiations.
Let me ask you about Hormuz, if possible. Can the U.S. and allies, can they guarantee navigation, freedom of navigation in the state?
Well, that's the law. It's an international waterway. No country is allowed to charge tolls or fees on an international waterway. That's existing international law. That's the way it is and international waterways all over the world, and that's the way we expect it'll be here. So I don't think we have anybody to convince around here in that regard. I think all the countries in this region would agree with us. All right? See you tomorrow.
So, yeah, I just don't really see this going too well. When you have Marco Rubio talking that way and these politicians around Trump who are basically not saying anything about Israel, nothing said about it, not a single word about it, this is a problem. This is a major problem where we have a lot of issues with this entire situation. Okay? Ultimately, again, this is not going to help end this war anytime soon when we continue to pretend like Israel is not a problem in all of this. When, again, they are the ones who continue to bomb and, kill the civilians of Lebanon and bring down apartment buildings. I don't see the Iranians do that. That even Hezbollah is not doing that. So why are we blaming Iran and Hezbollah for what's happening in Lebanon? That's just crazy. That's Marco Rubio basically shilling for the money that he's been given by Sheldon Adelson and really the Adelson family. Same thing with Trump. And, basically they're owned by the Israelis. So as long as this is happening, the Israelis are going to basically call the shots and control where this war goes. And it doesn't look like to me we're going to be ending this war anytime soon. This is going to continue on with the way things are going. All right. So again, look at this article right here from BBC. So right after Marco Rubio is telling us about how bad the Iranians are in all of this, just 6 hours ago, Israeli troops killed 2 in South Lebanon after a lull in fighting, authorities say. Israeli soldiers have shot dead 2 people in southern Lebanon, the Lebanese health ministry says, in the first fatal incident reported since the latest ceasefire between Israel and the Iran-backed armed group Hezbollah appeared to take hold at the weekend. Lebanon's state-run national news agency said that 2 men were killed while they were standing near a bulldozer that was unblocking a road in the town of Nabatea al-Faqa. Hezbollah condemned the shooting as a blatant violation of the ceasefire. And so again, but we're blaming the Iranians somehow. They're not even close to Lebanon. They're not even near they haven't done anything. They're just sitting there waiting for they're abiding by the rules. The Iranians are doing what they need to do in regards to this entire peace deal. And then you have, again, Marco Rubio saying that Iran is the problem. But right here, just in this article, and it's all over the place. Al Jazeera covered it too. We have 2 people who were killed in southern Lebanon by the Israelis, therefore violating the entire ceasefire. Hezbollah condemned the shooting as a blatant violation of the ceasefire. Israeli military said soldiers in the Ali al-Tahar Ridge area just east of Nabatea al-Faqa fired at 4 Hezbollah terrorists riding a bulldozer and a motorcycle who posed a threat. And it added that a group had crossed into the Israeli declared security zone in southern Lebanon and ignored warning shots from the soldiers. Okay, yeah, right. The Israeli military also said that in a separate incident, soldiers struck a cell of armed terrorists north of the security zone. It released a photo that it showed one of the men holding a rifle. There were no immediate reports of any casualties. NNA identified the 2 men in Nabatea al-Faqa as Mohammed Amaz and Sahid al-Hajj Ali. It said they were with a team from the Islamic Health Association. The Islamic Health Association. And why did they have a rifle? Well, maybe to defend themselves against the Israelis. Seriously, right? An emergency service linked to Hezbollah and a bulldozer that was working to reopen roads and recover bodies underneath rubble in the Al-Dir neighborhood. So again, these people just wanted to basically recover bodies, and they were basically paramedics, EMS. And what happened to them? They were shot by the Israelis. And then we're blaming Iran for that. Rubio's blaming Iran for that. Rubio is saying Iran is the problem. Hezbollah is the problem. Hamas is the problem. Anybody but Israel. What does this tell you? The United States and Israel are like this. And you're not going to see any kind of, there's not going to be any authority placed on to the Israelis by the United States until we have this Zionist regime removed, unfortunately. As much as I hate to say that, this is not good. Hezbollah's military wing, the Islamic Resistance, said in the statement, what the enemy has committed constitutes a blatant violation of the ceasefire, which the resistance adhered to up to this point. It did not say whether the group would retaliate. So, and what do you think? Of course they're probably going to retaliate. Pretty crazy. Israeli ground forces attempted to siege the ridge where they believe there is a Hezbollah underground military fortress in the days before the new ceasefire was announced. Yeah, we covered that story yesterday. If you go back and watch my live stream yesterday, we covered that same thing. 4 soldiers were killed in a Hezbollah attack on their tank in a nearby village of Gafar Tabnet early on Friday. The Israeli military responded by carrying out more than 150 airstrikes on what it said were Hezbollah targets. The Lebanese health ministry said 83 people were killed. On Friday afternoon, the U.S. said Israel and Hezbollah had agreed to a ceasefire following concerns that the continued fighting in Lebanon would undermine the preliminary agreement ending the war between the U.S., Iran, and Israel. However, another 20 people were killed in a fresh Israeli airstrike across Lebanon on Saturday, according to the country's civil defense agency. The Israeli military said it was reacting to its attacks from the group against the Israeli troops occupying Lebanon. Hezbollah said it had targeted soldiers who were trying to advance, saying it will confront efforts by Israel to seize Lebanese territory. So yeah, I mean, when the Israelis are continuing to drive forward and they're continuing to persist, they're continuing to essentially advance, then of course Hezbollah is going to defend themselves. They're going to defend the Lebanese people. They're going to fight back. And they're going to absolutely fight back. And now the Israelis are saying, oh, no, that's a violation of the ceasefire. But yet Israelis are doing that. They're the ones advancing. They're the ones continuing to move forward when this is supposed to be a ceasefire. So when we see all of this, again, the United States government is standing with Israel still, which means I don't see this war ending anytime soon. I see the strikes continuing to go on and on and on until we basically step up to Israel, until Trump really throws the hammer down on Israel. A lot of analysts, like Mario Nawfal, Douglas McGregor, they really believe that Trump is, well, maybe not McGregor, but a lot of these analysts actually believe that, Trump is really, standing up to Israel. And I think that's all smoke and mirrors. I think that's not true. I think that what we're seeing right now is totally a facade. And I do believe that right now, the United States is backing Israel full front. Lindsey Graham just said a couple days ago, go on my YouTube shorts, you can see all of these clips. And again, Lindsey Graham is basically saying, let me tell you what's going to happen if this Iran deal doesn't go through diplomacy. Trump is going to take the Strait of Hormuz by force. Literally quoted this. So, everybody around Trump wants this Iran war to continue. They want to get rich from the oil prices going up to like $180 a barrel. And who knows what's going to happen after that, right? So last video we'll watch covering the war.
Here we go. Fox News alert: President Trump isn't letting up when it comes to pressure on the Islamic Republic, issuing a fresh warning to Tehran about compliance, but Iranian leadership doesn't sound all the way on board with the agreement.
Trey Yinks joins us live from Tel Aviv with the latest. Hey, Trey.
From Tel Aviv.
Yeah, hey guys, good morning. After Vice President J.D. Vance announced that Iran has agreed to allow international atomic energy inspectors into their country, President Trump posted on Truth Social this morning saying, in part, if they did not agree to this, there would be no further negotiations. Well, the Iranians today are going on the record saying they did not agree to this point. Take a listen.
We neither had a meeting with the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, nor do we have any plan for the agency to inspect Iran's nuclear facilities damaged as a result of the U.S. military aggression and the Zionist regime. Fundamentally, there is no procedure in this regard.
Now, President Trump spoke from the Oval Office on Monday, saying that if Iran doesn't live up to their end of the agreement, he'll do what he has to do. The focus over the next 60 days will be resolving issues surrounding Iran's nuclear program and keeping the Strait of Hormuz open. With the initial agreement in place, millions of barrels of crude oil are leaving the Persian Gulf each day.
We took in more
I don't think
oil
that's true.
yesterday than has ever gone through the Strait.
What do you think about this?
Probably see that we have an oil gusher. The Strait is totally open, you know that, and we're negotiating. We'll see how that all goes, but we have two things. We have an open Strait, and we have a country that will never have a nuclear weapon. Will never, ever have a nuclear weapon.
And again, there's that same Netanyahu
Monday,
language.
The U.S. Treasury authorized Iranian oil sales, temporarily waiving long-placed sanctions against the Iranian regime. The sanctions relief will be controlled by the United States, and unfrozen money Iran receives in the future would be used to purchase food and medical supplies for the Iranian people, according to President Trump. Now, there is this other broad issue of Lebanon and the exchange of fire between Israel and Hezbollah. The Israelis today targeted a cell of Hezbollah gunmen in the southern part of Lebanon. They say they had intelligence that these militants were planning an attack against their forces. Guys?
Okay.
Wow, so Trey,
Right.
that is pretty big. If they deny right away that there's inspections, and one of the first things J.D. Vance said is...
Important to note that, you see this guy right here on the right? Pete Hegseth was once this same guy. He was just a Fox News anchor, essentially, and now he's basically advising on this entire war. That should tell you a lot about where this entire administration's at. And, like, this is all a show. It's all a theater, right? Everything you're seeing when it comes to this market, again, I know I keep saying it over and over and over again, but there's really not a better way to put it. It's smoke and mirrors. It's, again, everything is theater. Everything's a show, quite literally. And not like the Q5D chess way. I don't say it like that. Like, everything is a facade. Because none of this is true.
The IAEA, and we made a call at 2 o'clock in the morning, and nobody picked up. How could they be in the same meeting and have a divergent view on something as fundamental as that?
Yeah, it's a great question because it raises other questions, not just about their nuclear program and their willingness to make these serious commitments, but also about the Strait of Hormuz. The language that is being exchanged here is quite important because the Iranians will, at the negotiating table, agree to one thing and then come out publicly and say something else. And so we've got to be measured and patient here to see what actually gets agreed to. And if
there's the gaslighting, because that's what we're doing. We're coming out and saying one thing and then saying something else. That's exactly what the Americans are doing. That's what we're doing right now. That's what Trump and the Trump administration seems to be doing every time that we're watching these clips. It's flip-flop. It's back and forth. And then we're blaming the Iranians for it. Again, we can say that the Iranians might, who knows? I mean, all I know is that the Iranians have been far more accurate and consistent during these negotiations than the Trump administration right now.
Going to allow these inspectors into their country, but there is this other issue of the Strait of Hormuz, and today Iranian state media is reporting that Iran has imposed a daily limit on the number of vessels allowed to transit the Strait of Hormuz. They're trying to control this like a faucet that they can turn on and off. Now, again, if this is confirmed, it is yet another example of the Iranians saying something at the negotiating table and then announcing something else publicly.
So, Trey, that's where the rubber is going to meet the road. The president has acknowledged that he allows Iran to say their nonsense because they got to keep their population. But some of these things, they have to act upon, and these metrics have to happen within the 60 days. This is when you're going to get a response from the president when they don't actually comply with certain measures.
That sounds like us, though.
Absolutely, and that's
we're
what
the ones
President
not
Trump
complying
talked
with
about
anything
over the weekend
that we're
during an
making the
interview
rules
with
on.
Fox News. He talked about the Strait of Hormuz, and if the Iranians want to try and toll the strait, he said the United States will toll the strait and ultimately take up to 20% of the oil that passes through. He described this as the U.S. being the...
We were already doing that before this war. We were already taking 20% of the world's oil from this same choke point, the Strait of Hormuz and the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. Now we are struggling to control that, and we are saying that, oh, we could end up controlling that. We could end up having, enjoying 20% of the world's oil. No, we were at one point controlling all of that. Now we're not.
Guardian angel of the Strait of Hormuz and the broader Middle East. And so the president was very clear that if the Iranians go back on some of these agreements that they've made, he leaves open the possibility of taking over the Strait of Hormuz in the future. And so these critical 60 days are going to be...
As Lindsey Graham has said, as Rubio has said, as J.D. Vance has said, listen, when you have this kind of talk, they're already manifesting what they're going to do. They're telling you what they're going to do before they do it, right? So we obviously know that this is probably not going to last that long. Hopefully it does. Hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully, hopefully this peace deal actually works out within this next 60 days. We can actually end the war. But in order for that to happen, one of the conditions is that Israel has to cease fire on Lebanon, and they are refusing to do that. Ben-Gvir has said that, again, for one Israeli mother that cries, 1,000 Lebanese mothers must cry. And so this is what Ben-Gvir quoted. Okay, and then we have Netanyahu who is basically saying we're not going to stop. We are independent of the United States. We don't let them tell us what to do. We're going to take Lebanon. That's exactly what they're saying. And so this is all basically just absolutely misinformation. They really are trying to make people believe and make the public believe that we are actually controlling all of this and like we're going to have this peace deal. But with the way they talk, they're telling you we're going to just continue this war. Lindsey Graham is saying it. Everybody else is saying it around Trump, and Trump himself is saying it over and over and over again on Truth Social. What do you think is really going to happen here?
Very important to watch. And again, we have to wait for verifiable action because oftentimes there's propaganda coming out of Tehran. But then when you look at the international shipping data...
Like this isn't propaganda. This is totally propaganda.
there's millions of barrels of crude oil exiting the Persian Gulf each day. And so, again, patience is needed here. And a lot of these statements that are coming from the Iranians, they're speaking not to the international community, but to their domestic audience, understanding that they do have to make concessions as it relates to the Strait and their nuclear program.
Trey, two things. What do you make of the interaction with those leaders and J.D. Vance? They're hugging, shaking hands. Witkoff is hugging some leaders. We didn't see that. And also, what about frozen assets, frozen money that it's being reported in some publications that some of that money will be unfrozen for Iran?
Look at Jared Kushner in the background. Look at Jared Kushner in the background, just basically sitting there like, this is all my doing.
Yeah, President Trump today posted on Truth Social and said that sanctions relief in the future will actually go into an escrow account that we understand, according to U.S. officials, will have oversight not just from the United States, but also from the Qataris to make sure that at least some of this money, according to the president and the vice president, goes to buying U.S. farm goods and medical supplies for the Iranian people. Again, we've not yet heard from the Iranians about this point, and it's very important here to compare statements and actions about what will actually take place. What we saw in those images from the vice president, I think, highlights, at least on the negotiation side, the mediators have a very strong relationship with the Trump administration. Whether it is Pakistan or Qatar, they have worked both in front of the cameras and behind the scenes to try and move this deal forward. But the president over the weekend described this as a 60-day option for him. And he maintains both military action and diplomacy after that window if the Iranians comply or if they go back on some of these promises that they've made.
Right.
Well, it sounds more like the United States.
I think the less likely the president to act, but after the midterms, the gloves come off. Thanks so much, Trey. Appreciate it.
After the midterms, the gloves come off. Listen to the language. This is total propaganda, right? This is pure propaganda when we see it all. And this is what I do this live stream for, ultimately, at the end of the day. We are trying to analyze what is truth and what is fiction. And honestly, when we look at all of this, I don't think it's that hard to tell, right? So ultimately, when we see all of this happening, it's just like, come on. This war is not going to end anytime soon, in my opinion. And again, we also have news out of Ukraine and Russia. Trump's cabinet member described Zelensky as a special needs child for the Europeans. So again, this is interesting.
President Trump behind closed doors earlier. First, how did that meeting go? And secondly, he said today that everybody wants.
When you hire a pro,
sorry, we got an ad.
Want a little more info
because
ask for Mike.
Everything on YouTube today or an article is an ad.
Vladimir Putin.
No, I'm not sure that.
Didn't hear what he said there.
And do you think that includes Vladimir Putin?
No, I'm not sure that Putin wants to finish this war in such situation where he is and where his army, with losses and without goals he wanted to have at the very beginning of this war. He really doesn't want. But their economy is really tight, and their army is very tight. But also, our army is also tired. So we are honest and we speak about it. We do our best, what we can with our soldiers, and they do their best. But 35,000, as I said today, 35,000 dead Russian soldiers per month. And the number will increasing. And this is, big losses. It's up to them to continue the war or not. But we want to stop this war. And that's why I think...
False. Ukraine has been attacking Russia from the very beginning. Ukraine started the entire Russia-Ukraine war. And Western media wants you to believe that the Ukrainians are great. Ukraine is great. Russia's bad. Russia's bad. Yet Russian is the Orthodox Christian country. And the Ukrainians right now are quite literally... again, they're basically a proxy army of the United States, controlled by Lindsey Graham and the entire Trump administration to fight the Russians for whatever reason. They want to control the pipelines in Russia to control all of that oil flow and that energy, that natural gas. We want it. That's how America fights the wars on the Eurasian front, right? They want to fight those wars by essentially using proxy armies, and that's what they're doing. They're using Ukraine as a proxy army. And at the same time, this benefits Israel mainly. It does. Absolutely. And we also have rare earth elements that the United States wants to control there. So ultimately, United States and Israel, we're using Ukraine as a proxy to fight the Russians. And we basically struck Russia first, right? The Biden administration, really no different. The Biden administration, we remember the whole scandal with essentially Biden firing the Ukrainian prosecutor, or the prosecutor who was essentially dabbling into this entire Ukraine war, interfering with things. And Biden said, hey, if you don't fire him, you're not going to get the $1 million. And so pretty interesting how this all works. And so when we see how this is going, Zelensky is really losing this war. Again, if the Russians were losing this war, maybe we would see the same thing. Maybe the Russians are lying about their numbers and what's really happening. But all I know is I see videos on X of, Ukrainian soldiers being thrown into white vans every single day. They're losing their people, in my opinion. Yeah, Ukrainians do have a pretty strong drone system. They have they can pretty much mass produce drones. It's really a war of attrition when it comes to that. When it comes to Russia and Ukraine, it just keeps going on and on and on and on. And essentially, I do think that it is going to require some kind of peace deal like the Trump administration is trying to do, which is to be commended. But ultimately, without that, there's going to be a lot more war happening in Kiev and Moscow. Again, we saw strikes in Moscow. What was it, like 120 drone strikes or something like that? Pretty crazy. But who knows? At the end of the day, it's hard to tell it's hard to scrape through all of the propaganda. But in my opinion, Zelensky's losing this war, not the Russians.
President Trump he really can, because he has dialogue with Putin.
Yeah. And again, he's mentioning Trump, right? And Zelensky's talking about how he's talking in English. And what does that tell you? He's talking in English because he's getting your attention. He wants you to pay money, your American tax dollars. He wants more money to basically fight the Russians. See, the Ukrainians are basically running out of money, right? And basically the Ukrainians have to rely on the European Union, the United Nations, and America to essentially give them more money for this entire war, right? And as long as Lindsey Graham is in power, and as long as all of these people around Trump are in power, they're going to continue this on too. So it's really bad, but at the end of the day, who knows what's going to happen?
Not everybody has dialogue, just even dialogue. He has dialogue with Putin.
Sorry, another ad.
Many of you know that I have 8 kids, which
they
means
have to
my
just bother
counters do
everybody
not
all
stand
the
a
time.
chance. This new countertop prep
On the same level.
Messing up my stream.
I think America is much stronger.
Pereira is a dog. He'll fight the best at any weight.
Seriously, the ads are just getting ridiculous.
Than Russia, and you can see the result of this war.
So again, that comes from The Independent, that entire story. And really, when we look at that, who knows what's going to happen with the Russia-Ukraine war? It's a total mess, but ultimately, it's just, to me, I think the Russians are winning, and I don't think it's going to be long before they end up basically doing what they have to do to Kiev, and it's going to get bad. It's going to get bad. Ultimately, the Ukrainians have been putting civilians in these buildings in Kiev to essentially masquerade and allow for these military operations to happen. And it's going to be ugly. And you're going to see a lot more casualties happen because of it. So again, oil prices, we went over that. So Trump administration to slash oil drilling bond amount by 95%. The U.S. Department of Interior is slashing the bonds oil and natural gas companies must provide wind drilling on federal land by 95% in a move to encourage more energy exploration. The bond required and onshore federal drilling leases will be cut to $25,000 from the $500,000 imposed during the Joe Biden administration, the department announced Monday. Such bonds ensure that the costs of capping and cleaning up any wells abandoned by drillers don't fall to taxpayers. The change will be subject to a 60-day public comment period once it's published in the Federal Register. In a separate move, the department is eliminating some provisions and clarifying definitions in the waste reduction rules that have applied to the drilling permit applications. These targeted upcuts through the red tape has historically deterred investment, ensuring our public lands remain a reliable engine for economic growth and innovation, Interior Secretary Doug Burgum said in the statement. So, again, Trump administration to slash oil drilling bond amount by 95%. Very interesting. What's really going on here? Then again, the stock market, $51,666.84. Again, we're down just 0.09% since yesterday. So ultimately, again, and then 1 week ago, from a week now, we've actually dropped a little bit from the previous weekend. And then in the last month, we've kind of been going up, actually. So we'll see where the stock market's going to go. And again, I see this as inflation personally. What do you think? But ultimately, that's the stock market update. And on top of that, we also have the SpaceX and all of the news coming out of that. Again, SpaceX snaps its 3-day losing streak. The stock has been on a wild ride since its IPO. So this just comes out today. SpaceX shares finished Tuesday's session in the green after 3 straight days of losses. So they told you about SpaceX being a $1 trillion valuation company, and immediately everybody then invested their money into it. It's like, guys, once you see this stuff coming on the news, it's already too late. Okay, you have to get ahead of the game. SpaceX shares dropped to a new intraday low earlier in the session before rebounding into positive territory. It's been a wild ride for SpaceX's stock in the days since its debut, with Tuesday turning in another volatile session. After plunging 5% to $147, the stock's lowest level since it opened trading at $150 earlier this month, shares of SpaceX rebounded to finish the day up at around 1% at $156. The reversal came as a tech sell-off that started Monday expanded into a second day, dragging many of the market's biggest names lower. Yesterday, SpaceX tumbled 16% to close at $155, its lowest close since its blockbuster debut on June 12th. Mind you, you also have to remember that Elon just invested a bunch of money into the company Cursor, the AI company Cursor, and so that was a big acquisition made by Elon. So a lot of that is going to basically attribute to a lot of future satellites and things that are going to be done there. So a lot of big moves are still being made. Maybe you invest in Cursor. Maybe that's the better company you need to focus on, Cursor, because that is the company that Elon Musk is basically acquiring now, instead of focusing on SpaceX where it's already too late. It was the stock's third straight day of declines after SpaceX railed as high as $225 in its first 3 days of trading. So a lot of people lost a lot of money on this. So pretty crazy story. SpaceX, the stock market is a casino. Right, it's a casino. Same thing as crypto, but the thing with crypto is crypto has a little bit more wiggle room as an emerging market, in my opinion, because you just have more opportunity. You have the Clarity Act that's potentially going to happen, maybe, in the month of July. That's when they wanted this to happen. And if it doesn't happen in July, maybe it will be in August. And if it doesn't happen then it might not happen at all. And that's what a lot of analysts are saying. So Bitcoin's at $62,463. Ethereum's at $1,660.15 today. XRP's at $1.10. And the Fear and Greed Index is down at 20. So we are in the Fear Index. So interesting. And then again, when we look at the prediction markets on Polymarket, and when we look at politics, we see a lot of interesting developments here. So ultimately, Democratic presidential nominee Gavin Newsom is at 21.25% versus Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez at 9.55%. So again, Gavin Newsom's winning right now for the Democrats. And then for the Republican nominees right now, we have Republican presidential 2028 candidates. So it's going to be huge for all reasons that Zap said in the regulation and regulatory. The July 17th is a field hearing, not a vote, because the House already passed the Clarity Act back in 2025. The test that counts now is the Senate, where the bill still needs about 7 Democratic votes. And we know that Elizabeth Warren is not going to be one of those votes. And the Democrats are not feeling very good about it. So I don't know how this is going to go. Bitcoin, Ethereum, and XRP were already classified as commodities by the joint SEC and CFTC interpretation in March 2026, so the Clarity Act's main job for them is turning that reversible decision into permanent federal law. Each crypto gets something different from the permanents. Bitcoin firms up the market structure. Sorry, I made sure we were still going there. Yeah. Ultimately, a lot of interesting developments. Bitcoin, Ethereum, and XRP were already classified as commodities by the joint SEC and CFTC interpretation in March 2026. So, a lot of interesting things going on when we see all of this. Each crypto gets something different from the permanents. Bitcoin firms up as the market structure around it. Ethereum locks in staking and the yield its ETF can pay. And XRP finally closes the security question that hung over it for the nearly 5 years. So don't wait, the analysts who called NVIDIA. And so, yeah, that's just another part of it. This July, lawmakers are taking the Clarity Act to New York for a hearing, and it's being billed like the day U.S. crypto rules finally arrive. So ultimately, that's kind of where we're at when it comes to this. U.S. lawmakers are taking the Clarity Act to New York for a hearing. About the three biggest names in crypto, the question was settled months ago: Bitcoin, crypto BTC, Ethereum, crypto ETH, and XRP already count as digital commodities, and Congress has done part of the work. For these three cryptos, the New York hearing isn't where anything gets decided, but a stop along the way while the bill waits on the Senate. So what the Clarity Act actually would change for the three of them. So again, the New York hearing on July 17th is the one drawing attention. It's a field hearing run by the House Subcommittee on Digital Assets, and its title reveals everything: Building the Future of Finance, How the Clarity Act Unlocks Innovation. It's built to argue the bill and take testimony for the industry, not to vote on anything. The hearing also won't change much because the House already passed the Clarity Act back in July 2025 by a wide 294 to 134 margin, with dozens of Democrats on board. New York is mostly a stage to keep up the pressure while the decision that counts plays out in the Senate. In the Senate, the bill cleared the Banking Committee on a 15-9 vote and has parked the calendar since June 1st, ready for the floor vote that hasn't been scheduled yet. And that's basically the holdup. To pass, it needs 60 votes. Republicans hold around 53 seats. So even with every Republican on board, the bill is about 7 Democrat votes short, and only 2 have publicly supported it so far. So not really good, right? We're not in a great position for this thing to pass. And so you can thank the Democrats again, because they're pretty much the reason that you're not going to see crypto really have any kind of progress. And you can also maybe blame Brian Armstrong as well. And JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon, he's been basically saying how he's going to fight it. He's going to fight it because it doesn't benefit the banks and it really benefits retail, which means that JP Morgan has to do something about that to make sure that you are not benefiting from it, right? Very important that you don't make money in the future economy. Very important to these billionaires that you do not make money. Very, very important. So ultimately, when we see this, something to take into consideration is just how little these people really care about your success. Sorry, we just keep cutting in and out when it comes to this stream. Just making sure that we're still on. What do you think? What is your favorite crypto? Do you believe in crypto? Are you invested in crypto? Honestly, I think crypto is going to be huge for the future, and I think there's a lot of potential for it. But honestly, going to be interesting to see where things really lie and where things really stand with it. So ultimately, at the end of the day, it's going to be interesting to see where things are heading. So where were we here? Had to make sure we were all good. So again, Clarity Act. Okay, we're back on track. Just wanted to make sure we were still going here. Having some technical difficulties. Gold price is at $4,109.98 today. And again, silver's at $61.87 an ounce. So again, gold and silver pretty much in the same place. Elon Musk reposted this today. This had 1.8 million views and it was only posted at like 1:31 p.m. So interesting. Let's take a look at this clip. This is Rand Paul basically calling out all of the USAID funding for the coronavirus research in China, gain of function research, essentially. Everything that they said was a conspiracy, and it is now proven to be a reality. All the conspiracy theorists were right.
Fund coronavirus research in Wuhan, China?
We did not fund gain of function research,
That's not the
as
question.
you know.
The question is, did you fund coronavirus research in Wuhan, China?
Before my time, there was the PREDICT program with which you're familiar, which ended in China in 2019.
This is a $200 million program, and the GAO has also identified that some of these grants went directly to the Wuhan Institute of Virology, where there is a suspicion that the lab leak began the pandemic. Has USAID awarded funds to the Academy of Military Medical Sciences in China?
Not to my knowledge, but I'd have to get
I think the answer is once again yes. GAO has found that there have been subawards of NIH money as probably as well as USAID money that went to the Academy of not just medical research, military medical research in China. Now, part of the unknowns here is we can't get the records to look at this. So I've been asking for months and months for records. In September of last year, I wrote Ms. Powers, USAID, a request asking for records from the PREDICT program. These are not classified. These are simply records of scientific research, and we want to read the grants to find out what they were doing and whether the research was dangerous or not.
It was.
The response I got from your agency was
killed a lot of
USAID
people.
will not be providing any documents at this time. They're just unwilling to give documents on scientific grant proposal. We're paying for it. They're asking for $745 million more in money, and we get no response. So 2 weeks ago, the ranking member, Risch, myself, and 25 other Republican senators, unfortunately, so far, signed a letter once again. It's still no response. We're not asking for classified information. We're not asking for anything unusual. 20 million people died around the world. You're supposed to be an agency that cares about the death of people around the world. We, talk about starvation and famine, and 20 million people died from a virus, and you won't give us the basic information about what grants you're funding.
Why
around
would
the
they?
world, who
That
you're
would hurt
funding.
them.
Should we be funding the Academy of Military Medical Research in China? They're now off limits. But did we fund them? And who was making the decision? You know who ran the PREDICT program? UC Davis. Have you had any conversations with UC Davis about research in China and whether it was advisable?
So again, to set the record straight,
A
first of
political
all,
answer.
The PREDICT program ended in 2019. We have people
And
on,
yet it goes on in other forums and other names.
that's certainly not USAID program. does not go.
That's not what Tulsi Gabbard said. Again, Tulsi Gabbard just came out with this entire, essentially, expose on all of this basically gain of function research, these Ukrainian biolabs, all this stuff all over the world, Wuhan, China, things that were all of these basic, again, American institutes, all funding this entire coronavirus, SARS, all of these different kinds of diseases that are now being bestowed on the public, and the public's dying. 20 million people died of COVID, and all of this research you were told to shut up about it if you even mentioned it. Now, today, these people are being called out because they're being proven as liars.
Program called Emergency Pandemic Threats Program still, don't you?
If I could just finish in response to the first set of allegations, we have provided hundreds and hundreds of pages of documents related to the PREDICT program for the very reason that you say, because we are in
Not to us.
We are, again, as I know you had an exchange with Secretary Blinken as well, consistent
the ease of which these
with
people lie.
longstanding practice.
Not going to give them to
We have
us.
been responsive to the committees of jurisdiction.
Not going to. You've been
including the
consistent
Senate.
in not giving us any
That's
information.
not true.
But what you're
we've
saying
provided
is
hundreds of pages in response to the
To
Karen
whom?
ranking.
To
the
whom?
Senate, Homeland Security, and Government Affairs Committee, for example. We've had extensive
We've been requesting this and
engagement with
gotten
this
none of it. I'm on that committee as well. The thing is what we get from you and from the State Department at large is that if Senator Menendez signs it, you'll give it documents. Until then, you'll give us nothing. And we have got nothing, zero. You said will not be providing any documents. I now have 25 senators have sent you a letter, and you aren't responding. And we don't. We want.
How is it that 25 senators can send these letters? Senators, very powerful people, and nothing happens. Why is that? What is Congress for? What is the Senate for? What is it all for if nothing can ever be enforced? Honestly, is it going to be the American people who have to actually do something about this? Honestly, this is the stuff that causes a revolution. This is the stuff that causes an uprising of the people, because if the Senate can't do anything, if Congress isn't willing to or can't do anything, then what is really the solution here? I mean, something has to be done because, again, what happened during COVID was a genocide. that was a Holocaust. And it is being proven with all of these Senate hearings. When you have hundreds of millions of dollars, why do you need $749 million for gain-of-function research? And then you don't want to tell Congress about what it's being spent on? What is it being spent on? Are there mansions being purchased or something? Could there be corruption going on? Well, we don't get to know that. And so this is why Rand Paul is asking these questions.
We want to see the scientific grants. We give you the money. The taxpayers give you the money. We deserve to know where the money went, whether it happened. Look, you're right. It ended in 2019. When did the virus come about? In about 2019. Some of the research proposals that came about in 2018 were Wuhan Institute of Virology asking for money to create a virus with a furin cleavage site in it, a coronavirus, a SARS-like virus with a furin cleavage site. That's exactly what COVID turned out to be. They wanted money to create such a virus. So we want to know, are there other research proposals that you either granted or denied that were on the same veins of creating viruses that could have become COVID-19? We can't tell because you won't give us the information.
Again, consistent with longstanding practice, we are providing extensive documentation. We have a whole team of people who do nothing other than look back and predict.
That is not true.
It is factually accurate.
That is not true. Everything we have asked, we have not gotten. I have not seen one document on the PREDICT program.
I understand that, again, consistent with common practice.
Consistent that you're not going to give
not common practice.
No, we're providing
that's medical malpractice.
all of the kinds of documentation that you're
You are
describing.
not. You're
We
being
are.
dishonest.
You're
being dishonest.
I'm not.
We haven't gotten one scrap of paper from you. Not one
again,
scrap of
with
paper.
the committees of jurisdiction, we are providing all of the paperwork that
You are not.
requested by the
I'm on
chair
the
and
other
ranking.
committee. I'm the ranking member on the other committee, and I haven't seen a scrap of paper from that committee either.
Well, that is.
See, here's what the
I
American
can tell you
people.
what has happened.
The American
Actually,
people,
I can't tell you what
the
happens
American
at the committee.
people think this: that because you won't respond, and because you respond with a non-response, that you have something to hide. I don't know if you have anything to hide or not. I want to see every grant proposal that had to do with coronaviruses that went to China from the U.S. government, from all facets of the U.S. government.
Yeah.
And every bit of the Biden administration is stonewalling us and will not give us the information. It makes us think and makes us suspicious that you're hiding something. And it wasn't even you. This was the previous administration. We go back 2 or 3 administrations. We just want to see the information. And yet you sit there and you say, we will do something. We are doing something, which is absolutely the opposite of the truth. You are not being honest.
Yeah, and so this is what's going on today in the United States of America. USAID money funded coronavirus research in China that killed millions of people. And so Elon Musk, he retweeted this at 1:30 p.m. today. And so ultimately, that's why. You see all of the lies that are happening. And it seems to me, it's fairly evident that everything we're seeing with this entire COVID scam, it was a scam, by the way. It was basically, this was all for Bill Gates. It was all for Dr. Fauci's patents on the coronavirus, on the gain-of-function research, the Center for Disease Control, the World Health Organization. It is not a conspiracy anymore. And again, when you have $749 million being given to these people in grants, and then they're not saying what they're doing with the money, and the Senate doesn't get to know about it. 25 letters were sent to this woman, and nothing is known about it. You don't get to know about it. The American taxpayer especially doesn't get to know about. Why is that? And again, you had Tulsi Gabbard from the DNI basically releasing all of these files, proving that this money was basically spent on gain-of-function research and coronavirus research before the COVID pandemic even happened. Okay, so why is that? Who owns the coronavirus patent, by the way? Oh yeah, you'd be surprised to know that it is a lot of the cohorts of Dr. Fauci. So why aren't these people in prison? Well, it's because nothing gets done about it. Senators don't have the power you think they do. The American people have more power, and something needs to be done by the American people specifically. So another big story that happened just a couple days ago, Rabbi Michael Moshe Mizrahi, killed in Montreal shooting. A man killed in a shooting incident in Montreal today has been named as Rabbi Mizrahi, a member of the local Shabbat Center. So, and then get this. The Montreal shooting took place near Pornhub's headquarters, who were mentioned in the gunman's manifesto. This was actually the parent company building. The building is owned by the parent company of Pornhub. So very interesting. What the hell? Like, seriously. And during a shootout, a female cop ends up killing some prominent rabbi. So this was a comment on X, a repost, but it got 1.4 million views because it was just so shocking. This in front of the Pornhub building, not literally the Pornhub building, but the parent company of Pornhub. When we look at this, so absolutely insane. Highlights ironic details from the June 22, 2026 Montreal shooting in Côte des Neiges. The gunman ambushed police near ALO/MindGeek, Pornhub's parent company, HQ, which is a 100-page incel manifesto criticized alongside feminism and capitalism. Shooter Seth Hatfield, 25 from Alberta, killed Muslim officer Mohammed Lamin Ben Radine, and female officers returned fire, struck a bystander, which was the rabbi, Michael Mizrahi, a respected Jewish community member from the local Shabbat center who was directing people to safety. The neighborhood's Jewish institutions amplified speculation and replies about the rabbi's proximity to the Pornhub HQ, though reports confirm Mizrahi was caught in crossfire rather than inside the building. What an insane story this is, honestly. So viewer discretion is advised. I'm going to play this video of this shootout, and again, what you're going to see in this, you can tune away if you'd like. In this footage, you're going to see this female cop shoot the rabbi on accident. She had panicked during the shootout. Honestly, from a police officer standpoint, I am law enforcement myself, and just kind of judging by this entire film here, you're going to find that this shooter actually appears to be somewhat trained. He looked like he was pretty armed. Looked like he was actually he had some body armor on too, maybe, and he had this planned out. And ultimately, you're also going to see another officer crawling on the ground who appears to have been killed. And so, again, viewer discretion advised when I play this video.
Why is he walking? What is wrong with him?
So this is the shooter right here that you're seeing right in front of the silver car. Looks like he's got an AK-47. I'm not sure what rifle that is. It doesn't sound like an AK-47. It sounds like an actual rifle. And then this is the female officer standing right next to the other male officer right here.
Guys, what the fuck?
The male officer gets shot.
Cops.
Our shooter's right here taking cover. So again, as we can see from the little image here, the shooter, he has body armor on. Looks like he's got some kind of satchel, some kind of bag on his waist. Looks like he's in some kind of military gear almost. So it looks like he's got ammunition. This was definitely a planned shoot. And so this officer, again, viewer discretion advised, was shot. And again, I think he was killed. And he ended up crawling over here in front of this white car.
Oh my God!
Female officer panics. This is the rabbi right here that you're about to see. So here's the female officer where my cursor is, just behind this little barrier where this plant is. In front of the white vehicle, you see the officer who was just essentially shot by the shooter. And then you're about to see this rabbi, unfortunately, get killed by this female officer. And because he sneaks up on her.
Oh my God, oh my God.
And he gets shot.
Oh my God. What the fuck? What the fuck?
And so again, our shooter comes up. Our shooter then comes up. It's kind of hard to see him. He's right under the 6985 here. He's taking shots at her.
Why is he?
And that's just one little piece of that footage. There's other angles too to that. But pretty crazy story when we see all of that. And basically all you see from the other clips is he runs around that same little block where she was at. And she basically runs forth. And I don't even remember if she got shot too. I don't think she did. But ultimately, he was neutralized, the shooter. According to this next post here, you can see his body here. So again, this is kind of what we're looking at. So it looks like we have the boots of the officer down here. You have the other officer who might have taken the shot, or it looks like he's just doing the investigative analysis maybe. But yep, pretty tragic story. Pretty crazy. Imagine writing a 104-page manifesto that no one reads and an attempt at fame gets ignored, all because of a female police officer randomly shooting a rabbi. So, very tragic story, very unfortunate, very sad, but this is what we're dealing with in the United States, or I'm sorry, Montreal, Canada. So that's where that took place. Really big story. Hopefully, just learn your lesson. Just be careful. And female officers need to, keep their shit together under fire. It's a hot situation when you're a police officer. It's not easy to handle that kind of call, but ultimately, you gotta be better on your feet. Moving on to the next story, Israel is now openly threatening to use nukes against the world. Ironically, this is exactly why they should be disarmed and their future statehood called into serious question. This is by Ian Carroll on X. Why the Zionist project should have never begun. Violent tribalism plus an existential victim narrative is the most dangerous combination possible, and it's fundamental to Israeli identity. There are only two possible outcomes. Either they rule the world and all bow to their cohesiveness, or they keep picking fights until the whole world turns on them and they are destroyed. The slippery part is that it's not just Israel. They have dragged the entire global Jewish population into the adversarial and unconscionable position. And the real power of Israel is dispersed across global networks of Jewish billionaires and bankers that support it and represent the true power of the project.
Israel's existence is not negotiable, and it does not depend.
By the way, this guy was also Mossad.
On superpowers or the public opinion.
This is the same man, by the way, who also said that if American politicians don't support Israel, we won't vote for them anymore, he said. And he basically stated that, if American politicians don't support this entire Israeli cause, then, again, the Israelis are going to not allow those specific politicians to ever get seats in politics in the United States. Just goes to show how much they control America.
And if they keep pushing Israel
Allegedly.
to the corner, they are the ones who are going to suffer the most. Israel hasn't used everything that it has. And Israel, on a purpose, did not expose the advanced weapons that it has for a very important reason. We don't want the enemy to know what we are having. And now, at this point, we're just playing around. So,
scary statement.
This is the clear message to those who think that they can annihilate Israel. Behind Israel is existence, is the creator. Israel is not coincidental. I try not to, sorry for the long answer, please.
That's fine.
I try not to use God because God could mean anything for anybody. But if they think the Israeli survival 5,000 years is coincidental, they need to rethink.
And so, again, that is from the Israeli. That guy is the same kind of person, So basically, this is what we're dealing with. This is the level of resolve that the Israelis have. They do have a true mission towards their objectives here. Rupert Lowe, the rape gangs were allowed to flourish so rapidly partially because it was working class communities affected, and the establishment was happy to look the other way. The rape of English towns and cities, tolerated, enabled, allowed, and encouraged. The cancer must be eradicated. So again, Rupert Lowe is basically in charge of the Reform Britain Party in Britain, and he's basically trying to bring back, Britain again, because Britain's been overrun by third world Muslims, essentially, according to the British people.
The Labour Party has put power ahead of right and wrong. So you've had, and the fear of being called a racist by almost every state body has meant that they weren't prepared to look into this in the way they should have done. And that has effectively allowed this evil to propagate. And Labour continue to refuse. They refused a national inquiry. They've now said they're having a national inquiry as a result of what we've done. We've had 20,000 people who've crowdfunded a rape gang inquiry, which we've held. We had 2-week hearings, 2 of the worst weeks of my life. We heard some absolutely horrific testimony. And a lot of this goes back to the tensions, really. A lot of it's down to Islam and the way in which Islam teaches its followers that they are superior to other religions.
So again, it's not just the Israelis who have this sycophantic kind of belief that they are better than any non-Jew. They really believe that. That is according to the Jewish people. We've gone through so many videos on my streams. Go back and watch them all. I don't think you really need to watch any other videos. I think Anybody who's non-Jewish has, the Jews have this supremacy kind of attitude to them. And then you also have Islam, who also believes that if you are not Islamic, then basically you should have jihad bestowed upon you, right? And which is a violent form of retribution to anybody who's not Islamic or Muslim. So we have a really toxic thing happening between every other kind of religious ethnocentricity who believes that they are above anybody who doesn't coincide with their religion. This is a religious holy war, which is not so holy. And the people that are pushing this, again, whether it's the Israelis or whether it is the Muslims, two groups of people, by the way, who are fighting against each other right now, they are putting them on the white European native people of Britain. And what are the white European native people of Britain doing? Well, they're doing nothing because they don't want to be called racist. But, at the end of the day, they were the ones who gave these people freedom and rights. Okay, ultimately, that's true. And you would argue, well, the British were tyrants for thousands of years. It's like, okay, but that is blood guilt. That's blood libel. That is just pure, holding a grudge. And the same people who freed these people and gave all of these rights to these immigrants, whether they be Jewish, whether they be immigrants, it's like, dude, why is it that the white man is so bad? It's like the whole world is against the Europeans and the Americans and the white people, when it's like the white people were the ones who abolished slavery. The white people were the ones who wanted to give the rights to the Jewish people. You have Donald Trump, who is the most pro-Israeli president who has ever existed. He's the most pro-Jewish president. 80% of his cabinet is Jewish. And then you still have the Israelis who are saying, oh, Trump is not good enough. He is not good enough. He does not enough for Israel. And then you also have the Muslims who say, oh, white man bad. We come to your country because you ruin our country by war, and we are going to destroy you because of it. And it's like, what is this attitude? Oh, you are not Muslim, you should be killed. You really have these beliefs, and you don't hear the Christians or the Catholics talking this way, and that's the interesting thing here.
And as you know, if you ever during these crusades, if you lost a battle to Saladin, you had two choices: you either converted to Islam or they killed you. And
that's true.
It's not dissimilar to that, and we go into all the reasons, and I urge everybody to read our report. It's 200 pages of, I think it's fascinating, even though my wonderful team has done it with the help of a superb barrister called Graham Smith. We held the hearings properly. We've done it with the backing of these 20,000 concerned people here, so it's a big issue here. And a lot of it has been hushed up because it's in working class communities rather than the mainstream wanting it. So these people who call me a neo-Nazi have allowed, this is a national newspaper, have allowed this evil to continue for, as I say, 30, 40, 50 years on an increasing scale. And it's been allowed because people are frightened of being called racist.
100% true. And so who are the real neo-Nazis? It is the Israelis who are backing all of these ideas in America. And then over in the UK, it is the white liberal people and a lot of these pro-Zionist kind of politicians who are pushing this, essentially the clergy plan, essentially Gog and Magog, the war between Christians and Muslims. And they really want to basically wipe out the Christians and the Muslims so the Jews can rule over the coming future of this mixed race society, of which is basically going to fall into chaos, and that therefore the Jews will run everything. That is the belief of the clergy plan, the Great Replacement, and so that's what I see happening. That's what a lot of different analysts would agree on if you were to look at that. What do you think? So ultimately, that's kind of my take on it. But I just think it's really crazy to see what's really going on here.
Bombshell new report shows that
again, more on the
Department of
COVID
Defense,
story
yes,
here.
the Pentagon controlled the COVID-19 program from the very beginning. Everything we were told was political theater, basically to cover it up, right down to the FDA vaccine approval process. It was all theater. That means that human beings were used as props, essentially. According to newly obtained documents, the Pentagon used a combination of shady approval authorizations that are still in use, including the PrEP Act, the Emergency Use Authorization, and other transaction authority, the OTA, all of which shielded big pharma agencies, medical participants that delivered unregulated vaccines from any liability and protected them, basically. We've gone through a lot of these documents and just showed how they are not on the hook for any of this liability.
So my first finding was that.
So again, and they were calling people like me, conspiracy theorists, for that. And now you have all of the evidence. You have all of the data. You have whistleblowers.
These products were not good manufacturing practice compliant. And that I found right away when they started being rolled out due to extreme variability of adverse events and deaths that were reported per each lot of the so-called vaccine. So that was very shocking to me as a pharmaceutical professional, because we know how high quality pharmaceuticals typically must be manufactured. There should be practically no variation lot to lot in terms of toxicities or any other performance characteristics. And these products were varying about 1,000 times lot to lot. So that was extremely concerning. And I didn't realize why that was happening, but I just knew that they were not good manufacturing practice compliant. And then the final piece of the puzzle was when I was able to see all these contracts from the DoD. And when I saw those contracts, there were around 400 that are now available for all COVID, so-called COVID countermeasures, including vaccines. We realized that was really what was going on. The Department of Defense used a very shady contracting practices and also used several laws that were put in place previous to COVID to do this, to shield pharmaceutical companies, to not conduct proper clinical trials, to do a lot of fraudulent, I would say, manipulations of public perception, and all in collusion, obviously, with mainstream media and these pharma companies. And so as a result, we have this theatrical performance called clinical trials, but they were actually not real. They did not, based on the laws that are used here and invoked in this process, clinical trials are not required at all. In fact, they cannot be conducted.
Insane. So again, you see all of this happening right before your eyes, and here just a few years ago, you were called crazy for this if you were talking this way. And here now it's all facts. Now it's all evidence. COVID-19 was a complete and total, I wouldn't say a hoax, it was completely and totally an operation. And it was, it was an advertising scheme for Pfizer. It was a research experiment on the human population, the Tuskegee experiment, for example. And you have all these different forms of extremely, very dangerous forms of medical malpractice. And all of this killed 20 million plus people on Earth. And so again, that doesn't include all of the people who got double vaxxed and got the vaccine and had to go through all of this. Just absolutely diabolical. So again, when we look at all of this, lots of crazy stories, but this is pretty much what's new. Again, what's new in the headlines on X. Let's see if there's anything new in the algorithm here now that we've pretty much gone through all of the main news of the day. Anything that's new, anything I missed over the past like 2 hours here almost. Pretty much coming up to the end of the show. So we covered this, covered that. Again, notifications. Let's look at what's new. Oh, oops. Here we go. So I want to see any kind of new followers, anything that's new. I think Israel's a threat. Carlson, so this is by Alex Jones on X. I think Israel's a threat. Carlson agrees with Jones that Israel's leadership has been publicly threatening a new 9/11 in an attempt to hold the U.S. hostage for the Greater Israel Project. So I think this is a great place to end the show.
We'll end it very little interpretation because they're pretty direct.
So I'm really concerned that all Israel has left is nuclear blackmail and or a nuclear false flag or something like it to blame Iran. I really think that's on the table. What does Tucker Carlson think?
I think you're clearly right. I mean, they're saying it out loud, so we're not guessing. I mean, you just interpret their statements, which need very little interpretation because they're pretty direct statements. And I think they reflect reality. It's not a conspiracy theory. They are kind of out of options other than to do something really crazy where lots of innocents die. And I don't see how that's good for anyone. I think Israel's a threat. Israel has one trump card. It's nuclear weapons. And you don't want to put Israel in a position where they...
That's actually not true. The Israelis, a lot of people don't know this, but the Israelis actually do have electromagnetic weaponry. And they also have, a laser in the sky that they direct laser satellites, and they own those and they control those. So that's a very coincided with the U.S. military. Also, we have some of this technology as well. But there's a lot of very dangerous technology, weather manipulation, things that you really wouldn't even believe, science fiction realm level technology. And so the Israelis, we heard it a few minutes ago, they haven't shown all of their cards and all of the weapons they have. They do not just have nuclear weapons. The Israelis have much, much worse. They have electromagnetic radiation. They have a lot of these different weapons that can control essentially your ways of thinking and your thinking patterns. They have mRNA changing vaccines and things like this. They have, nanotechnology and a lot of different ways that they can manipulate the public. And so if you're not paying attention to this stuff, you wouldn't know. But all of this is on record, and this has all been proven over time, many, many decades now. A lot of analysts have known this, especially in the Pentagon, especially CIA. We've been following this for a long time. And, direct laser satellites, and not just Lockheed Martin level direct laser satellites, not just, DARPA and things like that. A lot of more advanced things that you wouldn't even really believe exist. Science fiction.
They feel they have no choice but to use those weapons. I think Israel's always been a lot closer to using nukes than any other country. I mean, we know that because they've said that. And I think they're now closer than they've ever been. So I'm not in charge of anything. I'm just a podcaster. But if I were running the US government, I would, immediately distance myself from Israel, stop paying for their genocide, of course, on moral grounds. But I would also try to calm them down, because if they get too overwrought, really destructive things could happen. That's an absolute possibility.
Well, it's kind of the goal. And they've said that.
Now we have all these intelligence people and military over there saying, we need a new 9/11 to show America to get in line. Iran's about to do a new 9/11. Oh, yeah, we know who was heavily involved in 9/11. Clearly, the Likudniks, Israel, along with some of their own elements, bare minimum, stand down, Building 7, the bombs in the buildings.
Yes.
So I'm really concerned that all Israel has left is nuclear blackmail and or a nuclear false flag or something like it to blame Iran. I really think
They have worse
that's on the
they can
table.
do.
What does Tucker Carlson think?
They have much worse
I think
they can
you're clearly
do.
right. I mean, they're saying it out loud, so we're not guessing. I mean, you just interpret their statements, which need very little interpretation because they're pretty direct statements. And I think they reflect reality. Israel feels that it's out of options other than something extreme. Moreover, this is not the beginning of the story. It's the end of a generations-long story. The buildup has been going for my entire life, and I'm 57, where Israel's solution to all problems outside its borders, and often within its own borders, is force, is killing people. We haven't killed enough people. That's why we're not at peace. I think we're in a really dangerous place right now, because Israel is, for the first time maybe in my lifetime, legitimately threatened. And I say this as an opponent of the Israeli government, obviously a fairly well-known opponent of the Israeli government, but I don't want to see innocents die anywhere, including Israel, period. I believe in universal standards. It's always wrong to kill innocent people, including in Israel. So I'm not wishing their destruction, but I think they are in a very tough spot. And the problem for Israel is they've been talking for 50 years, my whole conscious life, about how they're on the verge of being destroyed. And that's always been a lie. But now you have an Iran that is a regional power. It's a global power, and it's not going to go away. And so Israel is in a place where domestically the country's gone crazy. They're convincing themselves that, every crisis is an existential crisis. The only way out is to kill more people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then their great enemy suddenly becomes, paradoxically, ironically, way more powerful than it was when this war started 3 months ago. And so, where does that leave the Israelis? By the way, the United States is clearly going to begin the process, hopefully a short process, of distancing itself from Israel. We've got no choice. And they know that. The smart ones know that. So they're in a box. And in general, you don't want to put people in boxes. You don't want to corner them, people or animals, because they do unpredictable things. And so I think Israel's a threat. Israel has one trump card. It's nuclear weapons.
Well, no doubt about it. Again, we have H.R. 8800, the National Defense Disclosure Act of the fiscal year 2027, with subsections 222 to 224, which have now been changed to 618, and different sections throughout the entire bill. Again, allowing the Israeli military to become fused with the United States military. This puts us at grand threat, and it puts us at a major, very dangerous point in history. And it puts us in a place as Americans where we have to act, or we're going to lose our own sovereignty. And not only that, beyond America, again, this goes, it asks the question, what are the Israelis going to be able to do to the people of Gaza? If they can do whatever they want to them, and nobody, including the United States, is going to step in, the nation that stood up against the Nazis and the nation that liberated the West and abolished slavery and all of these amazing things. And if we can't stand up to the Israelis, then who is the real superpower now? And it puts us in a really dangerous spot, especially geopolitically throughout the entire world above America. Again, when it comes to every other country, what will the Israelis do to the Lebanese people as they're doing now? They said that they want to use the Gaza model. What are they going to do to the people of Iran if Iran truly didn't have any kind of nuclear program? If they did have a regime change, which put in some kind of, basically a regime that would allow, their entire country to be overtaken and occupied. Well, not only would they be the superpower of the Middle East and they would control trade, it's so much bigger than that. And it's even bigger than the Greater Israel Project, because the way that the Israelis are conducting their wars, they are truly committing a real Holocaust in real time. And this is not just my opinion and professional opinion. This is the opinion of very intelligent analysts, military veterans. Again, Joe Kent has said the same thing. He was the former director of national counterterrorism. Okay, so these are things we can't just pretend do not exist. And you have real experts who are agreeing on the same consensus about the state of Israel and the danger that they pose to the United States. So very dangerous.
You don't want to put Israel in a position where they feel they have no choice but to use those weapons. I think Israel's always been a lot closer to using nukes than any other country.
Jonathan Pollard has said that.
Because they've said that. And I think they're now closer than they've ever been. So I'm not in charge of anything. I'm just a podcaster. But if I were running the U.S. government, I would, immediately distance myself from Israel, stop paying for their genocide, of course, on moral grounds. But I would also try to calm them down, because if they get too overwrought, really destructive things could happen. That's an absolute possibility. And anyone who says it's not a possibility is lying. It is a possibility. So I would be very concerned. I am very concerned about that. But I do think, to the extent the United States government can influence Israel, one is with the stick, which is funding. No mas. We're not going to pay for any more slaughter of civilians in Lebanon or Gaza or the West Bank. But also the carrot, which is, it's okay. It would be helpful if somebody, Marco Rubio is a close friend of Israel, been supported almost exclusively by the Israeli lobby and the Cuban lobby. His entire political career, he's got 1 million friends there, including the prime minister. You'd think it would be helpful for the Secretary of State and National Security Advisor to go over to Israel and say, let's just tone it down a little bit. There will be a tomorrow. You're talking yourselves into an apocalypse that doesn't need to happen. Please.
Well, they want that to happen. The Israelis have said they are trying to bring back their Messiah. This is a religious war. Then, according to this ethnocentricity of the Israeli people, the Zionist religion of Israel, they believe that this is the coming of their Messiah.
The kind of the helpful outsider offering perspective. When some disaster happens in your life and your best friend comes over, your college roommate shows up to have a beer and says, it's going to be okay tomorrow. And that's the pivotal moment. That's the beginning of recovery. No one has done that for Israel. And I don't know why. Because it's in our interest to calm Israel down. Because as you just said, correctly,
nobody else can.
It's not a conspiracy theory. They are kind of out of options other than to do something really crazy where lots of innocents die. And I don't see how that's good for anyone.
But let me announce the kickoff.
And so again, that is Tucker Carlson on the Alex Jones Show. Be sure to follow Alex Jones Live. He's alexjoneslive.com to follow some of his content. But that's pretty much all we have time for today. What do you think about this entire war? What do you think about where things are going? Be sure to like, share, comment, subscribe, support the information. And again, we're trying to grow this channel. I want to grow this channel. I want to be able to bring more information, more news, and I would like to be able to financially be able to grow a little bit more and to, expand on this operation. And ultimately, if you'd be willing to help, let's do it. Super chats always help. And again, be sure to subscribe, like, and all of these things. Again, you want to work with me in real estate, you want to work with me in software, I can help you do that. I'm an entrepreneur myself. I'm also law enforcement, and I have experience, working with businesses and all of this stuff. So again, work with me. And at the end of the day, what do you think about this Iran war? What do you think about where we're heading and this, the Iran peace talks, the favorability towards Israel, or the favoritism towards Israel with our own U.S. Congress and politicians, the Marco Rubios, the J.D. Vances, all these people, what do you think is really coming? And ultimately, I think it's going to be a forever war until either Trump truly, without just words, actually stands up to Israel through policy and does not allow what's happening to happen to Lebanon and Gaza. These things need to be fought against. And I think it's the most existential issue, national security issue of our country today. And I say that as a police officer. I took the oath to uphold and defend my Constitution of the United States. And this is the most existential issue of this country. We need to be focusing on this issue of the dangers of the Israeli military and what they're trying to do, when it comes to fusing with our own military. And I say this as I'm not an anti-Semite. I'm a Christian, and I believe in Jesus Christ. And you can't call me an anti-Semite if my own God was a Jew, according to the scriptures at least. I don't really think he was, based on his own beliefs, based on everything he fought against when he was here on earth. But ultimately, at the end of the day, Christ is the new Jew, technically, right? Christ is the real religion. Christ is the real foundation, and it's clearly so. Because if you're Jewish, you believe that anybody who's non-Jewish, goyim, should be killed. And if you're Muslim, anybody who's not Muslim, you believe that anybody who's not Muslim should be killed as well. And so where's the middle point? Where's the middle ground where there can be peace and humanity, where there can be tranquility and transcendence and the evolution of mankind to go into the next realm of consciousness, all of these things. And this cannot happen when we have these violent religions and violent, again, not all Jewish people are bad, not all Muslims are bad, obviously. But we also have to understand that these are real national security threats to the United States. When you have millions of Muslims coming into the United States, and then you have, again, Israelis who are trying to take over our government at the top levels of our entire country right now, of national security, of the White House, these things need to be fought against. So ultimately, that's my take on it. So stay prudent, stay powerful, stay wealthy. I'll be back tomorrow, 7 p.m. Eastern.